And please stay muted if you can, because we will take questions through the chat box. It is easier that way with this many people on the call. It is being recorded and will be available in a few days as soon as one of our volunteers can get it up on our website. And closed captioning is available as usual.
Hi everyone. I'm Alicia Wopat, and I am grateful for your presence today. I think we have a lot to share, and we'll look forward to the discussion and questions in the chat box after the presentation's over. I just wanted to take this opportunity, since there were a lot of you present, to thank everybody who applied to the board and to introduce you to our 4 new board members who are with us today. I'm going to let them each say, just a sentence or two about themselves. And their bios will be, I think, are up on our website. So if you wanted more additional information, you can go there. So without further ado, I will introduce Lynn Gummo.
Hi, thanks, Alicia. I'm Lynn Gummo. I have a background. I'm a CPA. I've served on several not-for-profit boards, their audit committees. I've audited not-for-profits and have been involved in the federal government contracting, so familiar with the grant process. So I'm thrilled to be able to utilize those skills with SDAN being a board member. I'm also a mother of a young lady who's 29 who self-directs her services. And she's been self-directing since 2017. And hopefully that grassroots knowledge will help assist in the advocacy work that is much needed that SDAN supports. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate it. Athena?
Thank you, Alicia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Athena Elliott, and I have a 38-year-old daughter who has been self-directing for about 2 years. She also has experience living in residential care. So this is a model that we're very excited about, and I'm very interested in using some of my skills to help the broader community in advocacy and making the system work a lot better. I just retired from the federal government last year. I spent over 30 years doing internal auditing, designs, and serving as a compliance officer. So my background is regulatory systems and reaching special populations. My agency was the Indian Health Service, and that's where I spent my entire career. So this is very exciting work I'm looking forward to, and look forward to meeting many of you in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Athena. Beth Monroe.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everyone. My daughter, we've been self-directing. My daughter has been self-directing her services for about 8 or 9 years. She is 30, lives in her own apartment using a housing choice voucher, very close to me. So we love self-direction. My background, most recently I retired as director of supports planning at Independence Now, which involved reviewing plans, submitting them to MDH, advocating at MDH to get plans in the way we submitted them. Prior to that, I directed a grant funded by the Maryland Department of Health supporting families who are moving out of institutional care, to help them learn the questions to ask, what to look for in ensuring that their family members had what they needed as they moved out of institutional care. And prior to that, I was just involved with legislative advocacy, both on an individual and systemic level at the ARC of Maryland. So that's a little bit about me. And please join a committee.
Thanks, Beth. Stephanie Watkins.
Hey, everybody. I'm Stephanie Watkins. I also am a parent of a 27-year-old young man who receives DVA services. He's actually in traditional services. That's the best place for him right now. And hopefully someday we can get him into self-direction. I worked for the DD Council for about 10 years. That's the Maryland Developmental Disability Council. Sorry, I know there's so many acronyms. I helped oversee a grant program with them and also ran their resource website called Family Networks and helped get resources out to families. And then I served as a coordinator of community service, and now I've been a support broker for about 5 years. So really passionate about self-direction and what it offers for participants. So I'm glad to be able to be on the board.
Thank you so much. So with this addition of these wonderful people, we, I think, are finally in the position to be able to do more work by forming committees. And so we ask for you please to join us by volunteering for a committee. These are the committees that are forming now. A media communication committee, nursing issues within self-direction, a policy advocacy. And honestly, as we were coming up with these committee titles, we realized there's sort of advocacy in all of them. Membership, networking, education as another committee, and fundraising. So we can do even more wonderful things. And I even think with the fundraising would be a side interest in terms of potential grants and grant writing. So I hope you all will be interested in helping us and serve as a volunteer on one of these committees. To express your interest, we'd love it if you would email info@marylandsds.org. You could also put it in the chat, and we'll try to get the notes from that and take your name and an email address would be most helpful there, and whatever committee you think you might be interested in helping with. And we hope to get those committees going quickly and get some more work, some more power to you guys.
So thank you to everybody who advocated for the issues in Annapolis related to IFDGS and the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. We were successful in getting any reference to the Self-Direction Act out of the Bertha, but there is a report that is due to the legislature by the end of October about self-direction and the expenses. So we'll be giving, it's not coming from us, it's coming from the DDA. So we are interested in kind of gathering our own information so that we're able to ensure that they provide the correct information. The FMS issues, we did have a meeting with Deputy Secretary Hutchinson. They made it clear that if there were any FMS issues to contact Monica Herreri, who's the contract monitor, but also CC Robert White, who's the financial officer, and Marlena Hutchinson, Deputy Secretary. We understand from our Facebook page that there's some issues today with GTI. So any payment issues, please email all three of these people starting today. And Patty, you can update on the REM DDA issue.
Sure. So, we got rumblings about DDA, denying nursing support services such as delegated nursing or consultative nursing if a person has REM, specifically REM skilled nursing. So we know that this is underway and that people, as their plans are coming due, are running into this issue if they have REM skilled nursing. Rachel Sullivan is still collecting names of people, and Rachel's email is in the chat. If this is an issue that your participant is dealing with, we are planning on getting you all together in a meeting. We're trying to get our ducks in a row a bit first so that we can present some good information to you. So go ahead and let Rachel Sullivan know if this is a situation that is facing you, because this has can have dire consequences if REM does not pick up those hours. So we haven't dropped it. It's just a little slow moving. DSTAN is going to be putting out a survey in the near future on broader issues, but we're going to include some questions in there about the REM DDA nursing issue. So we're going to ask you to respond in kind to that. And we will be pulling you all together soon.
So we're going to get down to the sort of the meat of this this meeting. We have been contacted by many of you who are experiencing issues related to putting in your person-centered plan and receiving rejections, delays, and many clarification requests. Participants do have the right to appeal any actual denials, and we're going to be discussing that today. I want to just take a moment and be picky about our vocabulary and our words. Many people have taken some of the rejections they've gotten from regional offices or plan reviewers, saying things like, if you take this out of the plan, we'll approve it. Those are rejections, perhaps is the right word, but they are not an official denial of the plan. And so it helped, I think, me to kind of think about it that way. A denial comes in an official way through a letter, a determination letter, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But when you're in the process of reviewers doing clarifications, those negative pieces could be thought of as rejections, and they are still available to you to not accept that and to go back with further clarifications and reasons why your request is reasonable. So with that said, we're going to get into more detail in a minute, but I just wanted to make sure that when we use the word denial, that's like an official determination that's a no. And they typically don't come from clarification requests. Many cases, you might have to actually ask for a determination. Athena.
Thanks. I want to just say, make a few points here about person-centered plans, the PCP. It's important, I think, to clarify some of the acronyms. Many of you may be very familiar with them, but this is a person-centered plan. It's important to include all of the assessed needs of a participant throughout the day. And this means the focus is on the person. So that PCP should include all of the needs, even if they're not completely funded by DDA. There may be Community First Choice, CFC funding, there may be DOORS funding, or there may be needs that are being met by families and other volunteers of sort. The person-centered plan should include all of the assessed needs of the participant. And the point that I was making was just make sure that it really is everything the participant needs, even if family is providing it, if CFC is funding it, if DDA is funding it, it's really about the individual. So that's really the key that starts this process. The documentation, of course, supporting those individuals' assessed needs, that might be time provided by individuals or other funding sources. And being sure to include all of the health and safety risks. This really drives the underlying medical need, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's any kind of health vulnerability, and anything that has been identified already by physicians or other healthcare professionals. And use language from DDA's publications to document needs, either the DDA waiver, in specifically that the participant has these services through, the DDA policy stat, which is simply a collective of all of the DDA policies. There are links to these individual sites as well, and DDA guidance. Using those words and those language from those documents as much as possible really helps communicate to DDA that the needs are acceptable needs within this self-direction program. There's, as Alicia has pointed out here at the beginning and others, the responses from DDA follow a sort of a flow. They may approve the PCP as written, and there's no need for follow-up. That's everyone's dream place to be. You submit the PCP, it fully meets the needs of the individual, and then DDA may accept it. More often than not, there are going to be some clarification requests from DDA. They will have, what do you mean by this? Can you provide more information about that? The CCS is the one who will receive those clarifications and needs to inform the participant in the team so that appropriate and timely responses can be given. This should always be provided to the participant and their team in writing. The CCS may get an email from DDA, but the participant should ask that exactly what DDA has requested be cut and pasted into another email to the participant if necessary, or simply forwarding that written communication, whatever form it's in. But you need to be looking at the questions because that's really important to be able to be responsive. DDA may reject the service that's requested and request the participant to remove items from the PCP, but the participant and the team are the ones that must decide to either accept that request or, DDA may provide enough information that's persuasive that that service that's being requested cannot be funded. But if they do not accept that or don't believe that that reflects the individual's need, they can hold their original position and respond with further explanation. If DDA disapproves, then the participant can decide to accept, to advocate further, or to ask for a formal determination letter, which will include appeal rights. DDA is required to provide a written explanation of the right to appeal certain adverse decisions, and specifically what that decision was and what their reasons for that decision was, so that the appeal can be made to DDA or the Maryland Department of Health. Concerns have been expressed by many that they have not been doing this in all the time. And so that's what we'll be talking about in the subsequent slides. Thanks.
Lynn.
Thank you. So you have no resolution. Athena went through the flow. What's your next step? And hopefully a lot of people have not had to go this route, but there are solutions for you to follow in order to be able to advocate for your participant. So what is your first step if we do not agree? We talked about going through this process, and we have an individual, Randy, who will be talking to us about what those your rights and opportunities are for this. But I think it's important for everybody to realize it's important for you to keep advocating, even if you are looking to do an appeal or some other avenue to resolve the issue. Requesting a determination letter, as Athena had mentioned, gives you the opportunity to understand the position that DDA has voiced as to why they are not putting a denial in place for your services or your PCP. Next slide, please. So many of you may be familiar with the hierarchy of advocacy. This chart demonstrates the different opportunities that you have to connect with individuals if you feel that you are not being heard or you're not getting information in a timely manner. It is important to realize that this is the whole hierarchy, starting off with the regional offices, going to DDA headquarters, to Maryland Department of Health, the actual governor of the state, and also your legislators and your at the Maryland General Assembly. We experienced some of this when we were looking at the BAFRA issues just a couple of weeks ago. It's important to note that you, as an advocate, as a parent, as a caregiver of a participant or a participant yourself, you have no need to follow the hierarchy. You can actually go to any single person on this list and advocate at any level. I know people who do start at the regional office, but I know there's several that just go straight to the legislator. So, and or all of the above. So we encourage you to do that. I think one thing that I noticed was not updated on this slide. If you look at the regional office Western section, Tina Swank is identified as the self-directed lead. I believe that now is Kathy Forsyth. So just to make an update there. And I think, Alicia, we can make that update and resend that slide out. So I think next, Patty, did you want to introduce Randy for us?
Yes, absolutely. Randy Ames is coming to us from Disability Rights Maryland, where she's a managing attorney and with her specialty being in DD and health issues. And we are really thrilled that she could carve time out of her extremely busy schedule. So welcome, Randy, and thank you for giving us some time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. And I just want to preface with this is following the pandemic and kind of the flexibilities that stopped, and the Department of Health has, April of 2023, they started their annual redetermination process back up. So a lot of folks over the pandemic didn't have to go through the regular, annual redetermination. We're seeing as an organization, DRM, a lot of procedural issues, a lot of confusing and unclear notices being issued. And unfortunately, some folks not even receiving notices, those denial notices that were mentioned at the start, right? Like, how are you supposed to know that DDA or the Department of Health made a decision if you haven't even received a letter? So we're, kind of getting a mix of all these different issues we're seeing people experience. And really, I think that is because we had this period over the COVID pandemic where people were not doing annual redeterminations. And when the department had to start back up, I think they weren't fully prepared. And I think some of that is staffing shortages. But we see that people are unfortunately, being harmed by this. People are being told by providers with little to no notice that, their coverage is ending and having to scramble. So I just want to, not that this is, I hope this, for some folks, you're not alone, just to say that is like, unfortunately, the department has not handled this transition and these redeterminations well. There's a lot of moving pieces within the Department of Health that have not been talking to each other. And we're finding just breakdowns of communication. And while that is not an answer, right? I think just understanding that, because sometimes I think it's easy to think, oh, well, the Department of Health is this huge program, right? They administer all these services, they should know what they're doing. And unfortunately, we've had, myself along with the DD Coalition, we've met with the Department of Health and they're aware of these issues. We wish they would do more to give folks more flexibility. But unfortunately, we just haven't had, we're getting a lot of mixed messages. So even as attorneys, even as folks who do this advocacy regularly, we're getting mixed messages too. So we understand that folks are frustrated. And so I would just ask that, if you're looking for assistance, understand that while we can give what's required under the law, and I'm happy, to advise on that, and we can advocate. Right now, the situation is messy in a way that having to push back against the department in ways we previously didn't have to because of the unique issues we're seeing. So I just want to kind of preface with that of how right now what we're seeing generally and kind of the problems we're seeing with misinformation, lack of information, people being directed to the wrong folks. So with that, and I think we lost the PowerPoint. I don't know if you want me to, I'm happy to share my screen. Oh, thank you. So we're going to start from a place of you actually received that denial notice. And so that denial notice will have multiple important dates on it. It will have the date that it's issued, right? Like that in the corner. And then it'll typically also include an effective date. So, it'll be dated, April 1st. And that's an important date for you to see, okay, by April 1st was when this letter was issued. And from there, you have 94 days to submit a request for an appeal. So under the law, it's 90 days, but for DDA services, the department gives an extra 4 days. And so that's where, again, these notices can be very confusing because you'll see 90 days and then you'll see, 94. It's because under the law, it's 90 days, but DDA in particular gives 4 additional days. So that's why it's 94 days from that. If your letter is dated April 1st, that's the date you need to look at for your deadline. Now, what can be confusing, and I think the letters could be more clear about this, is if the letter has an effective date, the effective date, so say the letter is dated April 1st, you have an effective date, meaning your benefits, this particular service or this benefit is going to terminate effective April 11th, for example. They can give further benefit, different dates. It depends on the type of service and the type of request that's being reviewed. But say there's an effective date of April 11th. If you want to maintain that service while your benefits are pending, you have to appeal before that effective date. And so people can appeal, they have that 94-day window, but if you don't appeal before that effective date, you aren't entitled to benefits pending. Another issue that DRM and DDA disagree on that complicates things is sometimes the department will issue a decision letter, and I see DRM, Disability Rights Maryland, the organization I'm with. So then the notice may include, we're approving this service for a limited time period, meaning we're approving it for 3 months or 6 months from the date of this notice. So in our opinion, as an organization, if this is a service you've already been receiving, you should have the right that as long as you appeal before the effective date, that you should have those benefits pending passed throughout the appeal process. The department's position has been, we approved this service for this, say 6-month period. And so you're not entitled to benefits pending the appeal if that appeal goes beyond that 6 months, because we approved it, it wasn't a denial. We disagree with that because the appeals process can take several months. We've, due to just delays and scheduling, sometimes you need postponements, all of that you can end up with an appeal hearing, months and months after that limited approval of services. So those are kind of 3 pieces of a notice that's important when, if you get a written notice of, you want to look at the date of the letter, the effective date, and you want to confirm whether one of your services was approved on a limited basis. So there's that. Another piece of it is you will have the right to go through, you have 2 tracks you can go through. So you have, you can request a case resolution conference, a CRC, or sometimes other notices will call this an informal hearing. And so you have a right, instead of going straight to a Medicaid fair hearing, you can ask for an informal hearing. And so that would be internally with DDA trying to resolve the matter before you go to the Office of Administrative Hearings. So you can do, that's one route. And so if that informal hearing is unsuccessful, DDA says, no, we're confirming our decision, we're not changing it, we're denying this informal hearing appeal. That person then has the right to go to a formal administrative hearing before the Office of Administrative Hearings, OAH. Before that formal hearing, if you did not go ahead and do an informal hearing, say you skipped that step because you don't have to do that informal hearing. If you go to a formal hearing, prior to that formal hearing, you will have a case review, a CRC, where you're doing that. It's kind of like an opportunity to say, okay, well, is there any means to do a resolution? Can we resolve this? Okay, sorry, I'm just going back. So that's kind of the process when kind of things go the way they're supposed to, right? You actually get the written notice and the steps that you're supposed to take. Now, this next slide, I see that it notes that a determination on an application must be made within 60 days. So you have a right, Medicaid participants have a right to appeal kind of different stages. So if you file an appeal, or sorry, if you just apply, you haven't even gotten to the service stage yet, and you have an eligibility determination, you're able to appeal. Similarly, like we discussed, if there's a specific service for your person-centered plan, you get a notice, you can appeal. Where it gets tricky is, and it sounds what I've been hearing and what you all touched on, is that folks are being kind of stuck in limbo, that people are submitting their person-centered plan and they're getting requests for clarification and they're providing documents and things are just sitting. And I just want to make sure that is the issue that folks are seeing, is being stuck in limbo, and I'm seeing some heads shaking. And so this is where it can get tricky on how to advocate. So you have the right to file an appeal because the department has not made a decision within a reasonable amount of time. And so we've seen it where folks, some people interpret that as the 60 days. You had 60 days to make a decision, MDH, and you didn't. But under the law, there's no definition for a reasonable amount of time. But for litigating to try to push forward, we have used 60 days before. On the home and community-based options waiver and community first choice side of things, I've seen this for years happening. People waiting for plans to be approved and just things, months, and I've seen over a year a plan pending and just sitting, and that their supports planner or their CCS is advocating for things to move forward and it's just not happening. And so that's where you may want to say, essentially, by not making a decision on my plan, DDA, you've essentially denied me. And so I'm requesting a fair hearing. And again, it would be that same process. You just wouldn't have a notice. And that's where it gets tricky. Where do you go? You don't have a notice, you don't have a decision, just knowing that you have a right, that the department cannot just sit on your plan indefinitely. And so that's where it may be working with your CCS to kind of push and ask for a meeting, I think that's where it makes more sense to do an informal hearing first to kind of clarify and force the department to issue an actual notice. So that you have or at minimum, you can at least have a better understanding of why there was a delay or what information is missing. So that if you go forward with an appeal, you have an opportunity, you have a better understanding of what the issue is. Yeah, so this next slide with due process. So generally speaking, under Medicaid law, anytime there is an adverse determination, there's a right to have to an appeal or to request a review. Now, what we are seeing, and the DD Coalition met with the Department of Health on Monday, and we're seeing folks who are not getting any notices, like I had mentioned. In that situation, meaning your benefits are being terminated. So not that limbo, you didn't even know it was time to do your annual redetermination, or you didn't even get notice that it was time for you to submit your updated plan, person-centered plan, right? You didn't get any letters, or say you did all of those things and thought, I'm good. And out of the blue, you find out informally, so there's not an actual denial or notice, you find out your benefits are stopping. And that might be your CCS calling you, that might be your provider saying, hey, we're not getting paid anymore. And we looked in the system and it looks like the department, stopped your services effective last Friday. That is illegal. The department cannot unilaterally just stop your services. This is not something before the pandemic that I ever saw. That I never had a client, unless there was something very strange within, the Department of Social Services, or even, changes of addresses. But I have never seen a situation where the person was up for annual redetermination, they got no notice, or they got a notice and they did everything, and the department just unilaterally stopped their services. This is something that has been, but we're aware that this has been happening. I think it's, again, all those issues with the annual redetermination process starting back up last year. So what we are working on is some template letters that folks can send the department if that's the case. You never got notice, or you did everything you were supposed to do, and then you still got terminated without a notice. Then you can write the Department of Health and essentially say, Department of Health, this is illegal. I had a right to notice, and you must essentially start my services back up immediately and provide retroactive coverage. And if you want to issue a decision, I was entitled to notice. So again, this is a very unique issue that I have not seen before. So we're trying, yes, and retroactive is key in that letter, because you want to make sure you're being clear. MDH, you messed up. And so I'm saying, turn my services back on and provide coverage from the time that you stopped, because I only found out of this problem because, again, your CCS told you, your provider told you informally. You never received that official denial or termination letter, again, with those dates, with those appeal rights. The department cannot unilaterally stop your services.
This is we don't want to let you go, Randy, because there's a lot of questions in the chat, but this is an information webinar that is recorded that DDA did in 2019. It still applies, so we encourage you all to listen to that. If you have questions or need to understand this on a more granular level than you're getting right now, Amy Dougherty is the DDA Public Information Officer, and she's also a policy analyst. So she said contact her. Okay, so Randy, the questions, so one of the things that we were doing now was not specifically eligibility, but we know that a lot of people have had eligibility issues. So we encourage you to reach out to the intake number for DDA. So maybe DRM, is there the resource slide, Liz, that we could pull up now? One more. I know, where is it? DRM there's a resource number on there for the intake if you have questions and you want to talk to somebody there. So I'm just trying to look at the questions. Randy, are you good? Do you have a minute to stay with us? We don't.
Yeah,
want...
I don't have a hard stop.
Okay.
I have several of the questions.
Good.
I have several of the questions written out, I think. One is the CCS. CCS didn't notify anybody about their Medicaid eligibility issues. And the 10-day period had lapsed. What now?
Yeah, and that's where if you never received a notice, again, the CCS didn't tell you, you didn't get anything in the mail, because even though you have a CCS, you have a right to get a notice, whether that's right now, the department should have sent you several notices about it's time to redo your, for your annual redetermination. So if you never received that notice, and then you never received a denial or termination notice, meaning, we never got your annual redetermination information, we didn't get your plan of service, you're past your redetermination period. If you never received that, that's, again, the department cannot unilaterally terminate you. So while your CCS does have an obligation to monitor, your case, we've been hearing, again, like the department, we're saying, like, people aren't getting notices. What should people do? And they're, very quick to say, well, a CCS should be monitoring the case. It's like, well, when they're dealing with over 100 participants and all of these backlogs, things are missed. And the safeguard to that, right? Like the provider or the CCS not seeing something is the department has an obligation to send these letters out so that you as a participant have the right to say, hey, CCS, we were supposed to do this paperwork, or hey, I got this notice. When are we going to meet? And if that doesn't happen, they should not stop your services. Unfortunately, it's happening, but that's where we need, again, that advocacy, and we're working on some templates for folks that they can use to send to MDH and say, I never received notice, turn my services back on, and give me retroactive coverage from whenever you stopped covering my services.
Okay, great. So if people do get that notice, some self-directing people did get the notice, and at a point later in time, they were told by their financial management company that they were going to maintain payments until it was worked out. Is there anything in writing about that you have seen?
No, and that's what we've been telling the Department of Health, some of the issues of getting it, a lot of people have been told, oh, just wait it out, it's all going to get resolved down the road. But because there's nothing formalized, people are understandably concerned. Well, what if it doesn't work out? So that's where I think as a just to cover yourself, having that letter, of, and thank you for bringing that up, Alicia, because that is another issue we've seen of people who, the letter was dated March 1st, but I didn't get it until April 1st. What am I supposed to
we've
do?
heard that too.
Yeah. So that's, again, another one is you didn't actually, that's why it's important to keep the mail, look at the postmark date, keep a copy of it. And that's where, again, similarly, we'd say, you did not give me you did not follow the law. The department didn't follow the law in giving you appropriate notice. You need to reinstate my services.
Is there so your services should stay during the time of appeal, regardless of whether you're appealing a DDA service or a medical eligibility, Medicaid eligibility, is that correct?
Yes. So if you're If you're currently a participant, either way, yes, because the services go together, Medicaid and the waiver. So you should, by appealing that notice of denial or termination, your benefits both should be pending that Medicaid coverage that comes along with the waiver and your waiver services.
Are there any circumstances that we should be aware of where your services would be not available to you, terminated? There have been a few reports that there's like, say, the DDA has been saying to people, well, if you appeal, then there may be I think the word was disruption in your service. Are there circumstances under which that is allowable?
So twofold. One, if you miss the appeal deadline, so that night, the effective date. And again, that's where the timing can be difficult if the letter was late, if you got it past the effective date. And that's where just being aware, this is important to know your rights of, hey, I was supposed to have enough time to file this appeal. And that's where there can be service disruptions. But we're trying, again, as much as possible, reviewing what happened procedurally, and we can walk through, sometimes it takes having a meeting with your CCS, someone from DRM or an advocate, to kind of get a timeline so that we can appropriately say, hey, this Department of Health, this is what happened, and you need to reinstate. But some folks, I do also know, because of the confusion, because MDH has also issued a ton of notices, we have had a handful of clients who did miss their appeal deadline. So if the notice, if the date and when the person received it was timely, and you missed that 94-day appeal timeline or before the effective date, that's where there may be a service disruption because of that. But it should be tied to, first, you got the notice, it was timely, and unfortunately you missed it. But I do know, again, it's procedurally messy for folks right now because of the issues within the department.
Okay, Patty, I think you had a question, and I have 3 or 4 more.
Randy, there's often people that come to our meeting that have very little background. They might be in self-direction, brand new. Could you explain that? I understand you're talking about 2 separate things. We don't have a lot of conversation. We haven't had a lot of conversation about Medicaid redetermination. Make that clear and separate from the PCP process and can you make that clear to people?
Yes. So, well, but they are tied together. I do want to just say that, but yes, there's 2 separate pieces of this. Is every year you have to do 2 things. One, the department has to confirm you are eligible for the program. So just doing an eligibility check, that has to be done. And then the second piece is your person-centered plan. So that is a completely separate process that the department has to review separately and make a separate determination. So the department can check and say, yes, you're eligible for Medicaid, you're eligible for the waiver, you meet the medical and financial eligibility criteria, check. You have to do that every year. And every year you have to have a new person-centered plan that outlines your services, and that has to be completed annually. And then the department has to approve that based on your needs. Again, that's not a financial determination, it's a medical necessity, and the services, a service specific. So it's much more in depth. And that's why you're getting those requests for clarification, and it's this back and forth, where just general eligibility is black and white. Either you meet the eligibility criteria or you don't, where that person-centered plan, again, it's specific to you, it's those services, and that's where people are seeing these requests for clarification, saying we need more documentation, and it's a longer process, but they occur, the process, the annual redetermination and your annual person-centered plan typically starts around the same time because they go annually, but 2 separate processes.
Gotcha. So, is it true that SSI, people who have SSI, just straight up SSI, do not have to go through the eligibility process. It's people who have SSDI do.
Yeah, so folks who have SSI are categorically eligible for Medicaid. You have a right, an automatic right. And the Department of Health, in starting up the annual redetermination process to try to make things go smoother, they said, if you're on SSI, we're not going to do that extra check because we know you're categorically eligible. So yes, so some folks have seen that, some folks have seen that work smoothly and it just happened and they didn't even realize. But unfortunately, we have seen some folks who have gotten strange notices saying that they're no longer a resident of Maryland when the notice was sent to a Maryland address. It's just weird technical, but yes, for folks who are on SSDI, depending on their income and eligibility criteria, do have to go through the eligibility review.
Okay. What if you get a combination of SSI and SSDI?
It's SSI is as long as if you even get $1 of SSI, you are
Okay.
categorically eligible.
Great. People are asking, is there anything that an individual can do? We don't have access to LTSS at this point, although we were supposed to have it. But is there anything the individual can do to make themselves feel better that that they're doing the right thing?
Yeah, check in with your CCS, even if it's to say, let's have a team meeting, because I just want to make sure you have everything, So I have a colleague who, has been for months trying to make sure that their child, everything is smooth. They haven't been able to get an answer from the department, and it took their REM case manager saying, oh, well, because your child has SSI, that's why you didn't get those extra notices. I say, reach out to your CCS, talk to your providers and make sure they're being paid and checking, just to make sure, hey, everything is good. And if you haven't had a new person-centered plan, asking your CCS, when are we going to update my plan? If you haven't done it since April of 2023, say, okay, well, when are we going to do that?
Okay. So is it true the informal hearing and the case resolution conference are the same?
So over the pandemic, because there weren't terminations, folks weren't getting the same termination notices because people were allowed to continue on. To be completely honest, I can't say for sure how DDA is handling it. The difference being the informal hearing process is within DDA and you're asking for it, where the CRC, that conference, is part of a process to try to come to a resolution. Both are similar. The CRC, you're not going to have an appeal right because you're already on the formal hearing process. You're already going to have that hearing. But over the transitioning from the pandemic, I'm not sure how DDA is handling them. If it's handled by the same type of representatives within DDA, or being handled by DDA's attorney for the CRCs, I'm just not sure.
Okay. And somebody's asking if you need an attorney for the OAH hearings.
I recommend it. So as soon as you know that you're good, you don't want to wait until you get an appeal hearing date. As soon as you get a denial or termination notice, contact DRM right away for advice. You want to don't wait to hear from us to file the appeal, right? Because if you see, hey, this notice says my benefits are only going to be good until, I'm only approved through next week, get that appeal in, but don't wait for the OAH hearing, because Disability Rights Maryland or Maryland Legal Aid is going to need time to prepare for a hearing.
Gotcha. When you guys, when DRM does your templates, would you make them available to us then so we can send it out to everybody?
Definitely.
Okay. One question that I saw is if somebody has a full-time job and then they don't get SSI, can they qualify for DDA services?
Yes,
I
so
mean,
that's a technical eligibility. It's 3 times the SSI rate that you can make to get a DDA waiver. So I think now it's $28.29, $2,898 is the cap. But it's based on 3 times the SSI rate for the DDA waiver.
3 times that. Oh, interesting. Okay. Did anybody else see any questions that I missed? Carol, did I miss that are related to Randy's presentation?
It's like, can DDA ask/decide to remove a service on the PCP in the current year that was approved in the previous year? Example, respite services and IFDGS overnight support. Thanks for any insight. So I can partially answer this, but yes, they can, but that's where your appeal rights come in. So Randy, I mean, and that's where I think a lot of people are. They are changing the services from previous years, from either enhanced personal supports to regular personal supports, saying you don't need housing supports anymore, saying you're not justifying overnights, or you're not justifying 2-to-1s. So in that case, by not issuing a determination letter, they're not triggering this appeal process. And that's part of why we're here today, is to tell you that these endless clarification requests are not the end of this, where you do have to get to a point where you can get to a point where you actually have the right to appeal this. So Randy, elaborate if I missed something. Or
No, that's where. So again, when that happens, you essentially have 2 avenues. You can say it's been months and months, and essentially, you department, you haven't issued a denial, but I've given you every piece of information you've requested. You've refused to make a decision. So I'm appealing it because you've effectively denied me. That is a strategy that sometimes we recommend when, again, just to force DDA to kind of sit in the room with us and say, what do you need? What's missing? Because it can be very like back and forth and unclear. So that's one route. Or you can say, okay, I'm not gonna, you have everything, issue a denial notice. And then that will get, or the department should at a certain point be issuing a notice of what services are being denied so that you have the right to appeal. But I understand that people are being prolonged in this place of limbo. But the department should at a certain point say, okay, you've given me everything, all the information, and based on that, here's what we're deciding about respite or, supported, whatever that particular service.
Right. So in our slides that we've given you, we're calling it, and it's what it is. Back in the day when they did this, it's a determination letter, and within that determination letter, they will say what they have approved and what they are not approving. And then within that letter, if you listen to that whole report that Amy Dougherty did for them back in 2019, that letter will contain your appeal rights and your options, including if you have the option for an informal hearing, or if you would be a CRC, or straight to appeal, straight to a fair Medicaid fair hearing. So
Is there? Oh, go ahead.
So anyway, but I did just one thing of that list. IFDGS is not a service that is appealable in the same way, I'm guessing. And so I'm kind of throwing this out to Randy because it's not a funded service. It's coming through the leftover money for the funded services, which would be the direct supports, personal support, respite, behavior stuff. So that whole approval process is different than the actual person-centered plan. That's a whole different.
Yeah.
The only thing that shows up on your person-centered plan as far as a budgeted item is that recruitment and staffing recruitment, because that's state-only funding right now.
Randy.
And sorry, so yes, so even for, I forgot, so again, because these notices are, can be very complex. So anything that is a even state-only funded services do have appeal rights. And so on the notice, again, some of these, it's like you'll see different timelines. So for DGS, because that is a state-only funded service, there is an appeal deadline of 45 days, but they give you 49 because they give you the additional 4 days. But that is so it is a state, instead of a Medicaid fair hearing, it's called a state hearing. And so that's a different process because you're essentially, because it's not the Medicaid pot of money, the same way it's a different kind of hearing process, but there is still a mechanism to appeal that, and you still have appeal rights. And in the notice, it should specify for state services, there is a 45-day, providing 49 to appeal that. And I'm not sure about the rights to benefit pending, and I can do some more research on that and follow up with folks at SDAN on that, because that is a little trickier because of the funding source.
But
And if you had it.
I'm just, so here's my question. If they are changing the services in the current year from what they were in the previous year and you appeal, then you are essentially have the right to maintain the services that were in the last approved plan if
Yes.
they're not new services.
Correct.
What would be an issue and what might not go forward, I guess, if you didn't make that 10-day deadline for appeal, would be any new service that you were asking for. But if you're simply trying to maintain services that you had in the past year, they go forward through the entire appeal process, regardless of that 10-day deadline or not.
Yes.
Okay. That's one of the issues that we were concerned about. Most of the people, and I could be wrong, are not asking for new things and getting denied. It's trying to hold on to their overnight supports, their 2-to-1, and their enhanced personal supports at this point is what we're hearing from. And then now the latest one is housing services.
Patty, you had a question?
Yes, Randy, could you speak a little bit to what people, in the appeal process, the fair hearing process, when you go to hearing, what the focus of that is versus, like what you would need to have to be able to defend, because I think some people don't really understand the specific documentation kind of things that you would need.
Yeah, and so this is where it's important to understand what you're asking for and why. And so again, if you're asking, if nothing has changed, right? Like you asked for X and it was approved last year, and now you're asking for the same thing. You would still need to, it would be helpful to get medical records that support your need for that service, and also letters of support. So Disability Rights Maryland, on our website, we do have some sample letters of support that you can ask providers to kind of help explain why you need to maintain, say it's an hour, potential reduction of personal support hours. Why, nothing has changed, your condition has not magically improved, and kind of provide that medical perspective from your provider, what they understand of the kind of support and assistance you need. Similarly, it can be helpful to have, if your provider is willing to participate, to help walk through the services that they provide you with and what a day looks like and why. The other thing we're seeing is, and this came up in our meeting with DDA on Monday, is folks who have been stacking and braiding services historically, and now they're being denied, being told you're requesting, you're over requesting. The issue is though, is say somebody wants that, a lot of times the request for additional hours that aren't actually going to be used is to provide flexibility. And so explaining, hey, you know, because of this chronic illness, while I have supported employment and, you know, I work 40 hours a week, there are some days that I just, or yeah, 40 hours a week that I need that support. Sometimes I have to call, you know, I regularly call out once a month and I need that additional, you know, enhanced supports or personal supports to supplement for those days. You know, it typically comes up, you know, again, once a month, twice a month. I don't need that employment, but there are some months where I do use all of those hours, those 40 hours weekly. And that's where the department was explaining that their concern is that it's being provider driven rather than participant driven, and we disagree. That it's for the benefit of participants to have that flexibility built into their person-centered plan, rather than multiple times a year having to request a change just because there's these, you know, that needed flexibility.
I think that doesn't affect self-direction as much as it does traditional providers, because when I've started having people talk to me about that in Annapolis a couple of weeks ago, like, what are you talking about? I think that self-direction has this built-in flexibility more as far as moving money from one category to another without changing the whole plan or the whole service model, because one provider might be doing the employment supports and somebody else is doing the personal care or something else. So I don't want to confuse everybody. I think that we don't typically do it in the same way that they do, but we do have that flexibility to move money across certain categories, but not as much as we might need. But it's possible that that could happen too, that somebody doesn't need all the employment supports they have, but they won't let us put that funding into personal supports.
Yeah.
We do have the ability, I think, to put CDS money into personal supports, but if it was something as specific as employment supports, so, but it's not already built into the plan in the same way that providers were. So if anybody was confused by that, I think we're good on that one.
I have another question that's come up. In terms of the informal hearing, if it's offered, or a case resolution conference, is there any downside to choosing the more informal option before going to the administrative judge? In my experience, and I'm just one person, so that's why I'm asking you. It's cheaper because you don't necessarily have to hire an attorney to represent you in a formal hearing. But is there a downside to any of those?
So again, that CRC is going to happen just in the nature of having a Medicaid fair hearing. Just again, that's like a built-in process. So there's no downside. You're going to have that if you request a formal hearing. The informal hearing, the only potential downside, and I would say, while it's a downside in the big picture, it's not, is just that extra delay. If you're waiting for something that's an emergency, and you know, you've been going through this back and forth and you're like, I've told DD everything, I don't have any additional information, because that informal hearing is really going to be a conversation of, well, this is what we have, kind of talk. If you've done all of that, if you felt like your CCS has really advocated and you've been, you know, going back and forth, then maybe you're like, okay, well, there's nothing else. There's no question of what's missing.
So if it's a new service, you're saying, then maybe speed is more important than money.
If it's, especially if it's a time sensitive.
And again, in our opinion, as we were preparing for this meeting, we were feeling as though advocacy, once, let's say you've done everything you can do, you've asked for the determination letter, you've started the appeal process, no reason not to keep on advocating up that hierarchy, talking to your legislator, right? There's just no, you just keep on going and hope that you'll hit somebody who helps you resolve.
Correct. It does not hurt. It's just if you do hire an attorney, let your attorney know and work with you, because they want to be part of those conversations and know, like, hey, if we're gonna talk to somebody to try to resolve this, make sure they're aware of it or can be part of it if possible, depending on who it is. But yes, it does not hurt to try to get as many eyes on the problem to try to resolve it.
Randy, do you have, you spoke for a while and quite knowledgeably, and some people are wondering, like, we're going to have this meeting recorded, we have this meeting recorded and it'll be available, but does DRM have a packet about appeals that's available to people as well?
Yes, and I'll forward that on. We have a resource on Medicaid appeals and the DDA process.
Okay, that would be great. Well, so everybody on the call, then once we get that, we'll forward it on via our email list.
A lot of questions I'm seeing about Social Security benefits, and I don't like had SSI, father died, now SSDI. So I would just encourage people who have individual questions to do an intake, submit an intake thing with DRM. Is that the best way to handle that, Randy?
Yes, we're just gonna need, it'll be, and this is across the board. If you have specific questions about your, the impact of changing from SSI to SSDI, or if you received a notice or you're not sure, just be prepared to provide us copies of notices. That's very helpful for us to be able to get a full picture and be able to better advise you or point you in the right direction.
Along that same line, people who have been denied their individual family directed goods and services, things that are actually in the allowable by the waiver, allowable by the SD Act, and allowable through DDA's own guidance. I had heard a rumor that DRM was kind of keeping tabs on that and perhaps going to be able to assist not individuals, but in general.
Yes, so it's something the DD Coalition and folks have brought to our attention. And so it is something we're kind of just trying to get a lay of the land, because it's, again, with things starting back up with the redetermination process, and just because it's one of those where it's like, we're just trying to know what the issues are. And so that's the other thing for some of these very technical or specific issues that for some of it may just be us needing to collect information to understand what the problems are to better address it systemically, or go to DDA to say this is what we're seeing.
Okay, so are you collecting information on denials for that?
Yes.
Should people call your intake line and
yes,
or email, or okay,
Yeah.
good. Patty, I think you had another question for Randy, and please
Randy,
let us know when you.
We said something to you about this before, but what should people do who are experiencing this issue between REM and DDA? DDA, denying nursing support services because a person is REM eligible and having skilled nursing. Should people be contacting you all?
Yes, because this is, again, we've handled a handful of these cases over the past few years for folks. Again, it's very specific of the service and what's being covered and what's not. And that's where, yes, it's something we are interested in and have been trying to do advocacy around, to ensure that folks who have nursing needs are having their full needs being met, and however the programs can work together, because we're unfortunately seeing the department, both DDA and non-DDA, taking a very rigid position that we don't think is appropriate.
Okay, Carol, are you out of questions? I think I'm just.
The only one I saw is a mention of a benefits counselor. Could be somebody that could help people with these SSI, SSDI, and Stephanie is on the able to pop in and suggest where somebody might go for that?
I'll post in 1 second. I'll look it up, but they would just call the Ticket to Work hotline. If they're working, if they're not working and they're getting the adult, they could still call, and I think they will get guidance on, you know, who to talk to. If they're receiving DOORS services, this is a service through DOORS. But definitely, I've had 2 folks that I work with in the past couple of months being told by Social Security that the $2,000 limit doesn't apply to them anymore once they start receiving what's called DAC, or disability adult benefits. So, but there still are limitations. So you have to be very careful or you will lose your Medicaid. But there are ways around it. So you just have to learn what those are, and everyone's situation is different. We can't just sit here and tell you like, here's what you do, because everyone's situation is so different. But you definitely need to get support and know that it is a possibility to lose those benefits if not managed properly. So definitely it's important to reach out and talk to someone. I'll post that 800 number on there. I would start with that, and they can guide you. But that is a program through Social Security, the Ticket to Work program.
I one other question just came up. Essentially, let's say you it's a PCP and you've had these services before, and you've asked for a determination letter because they've denied one or more of those. You do the appeal's in process, you go all the way through, and the court denied one of them. Are you obligated to, what happens to the money that was expended that you used during the appeals process? Is that's just done, or is there any obligation to the participant in terms of repayment?
Yeah, so in the notices, you'll see language saying, you know, if you're unsuccessful, the department, you know, could pursue to recovery. However, the standard for the department to recover in one of these after a hearing is very high. They would have to show that you had no, I'm blanking on the term, but essentially it's a high, like if you had a reasonable expectation or a reason to believe that you were entitled to the benefit, the department can't recover against you. And so again, I never say never, but none of my clients who have ever lost services or were unsuccessful, they have not had the department do a recovery action.
There is one other service, and we can't seem to get a solid answer, and you may or may not know. On housing, if you are on the housing support wait list, do you have to have housing support services? Or if you stop having housing support services, which DDA is starting to question, do you come off of the wait list, even though you need to be on the wait list for those supplements?
That is something I will have to check on and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I think I have told you, somebody asked me if there's other services that they're looking at. Those are the ones that I have personally been involved with my clients. As far as other people, I think, you know, Randy may know, but it just seems to be any service that where there is a relatively subjective standard right now as far as what's the difference between personal supports and personal supports enhanced and maybe CDS 2-4 and CDS 1-1, because they took away the objective standard of HRST score of 4 or more, and now says nursing support plans or behavior support plans that that indicate an enhanced level of need, but there's no clear definition of what an enhanced level of need is. And in the past, it was just the existence of those reports that, from what I can read when I went back and read the older service definitions, was the existence of those plans that that met the level of need. And now it's a circular argument where you can't really define enhanced supports. You have the document, but then they say the document doesn't do it. And it's like, but what does? And there is no real clear criteria.
Yeah, this is where in meeting with DDA, we've gotten feedback, and we've gotten them to acknowledge that the way the services models are right now in the particular services, it's overly complex, and the eligibility criteria is unclear for many of them, because there are so many what used to be 6 services are now 20 services, and each have a unique standard and definition. And I think unfortunately, some of this is going, unless DDA magically, fixes things quickly, some of this is going to have to come out through litigation, of kind of forcing the department to have to come to some of these hearings, and they have an obligation to provide clear standards, right? Like it's their program, and how they administer it has to be consistent and accessible, and for folks to understand the standards. And so we're hearing these issues of the back and forth, and people saying, I provided them every piece of information, it was fine last year, why now is it a problem? And I'm hoping that some of this gets resolved informally, so folks can maintain their services and get the issues resolved. But I think there are going to be some of these services that folks are going to, it's going to have to go to the Office of Administrative Hearings and potentially further to get a court to force the department's hand a little bit.
Okay. All right, so in the chat, there is the number for for Ticket to Work, and there is a link someone else gave to chooseworkssa.gov. So, guys, try to capture that, but we will also try to summarize this meeting and send it back out to everybody. So I'm just trying to look.
I think
we've covered everything.
we have covered most things. I think, and I think we can let poor Randy go, knowing that she will be hearing from our membership, I'm
A
sure.
lot of people, yeah.
Especially, and it is sort of a large number of people are just starting their pre-planning process who follow the fiscal year.
Yeah.
So more and more of this will come up, I think, in the next 60 to 90 days, of course. So thank you so much for helping us out today. So we'll let you go. We have a few more slides to get through, and then we can continue on if there's some more questions. I think the slides will help some of the people feeling confused, that we have some more resources and things that you can listen to. So thank you very much, Randy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. If I had the opportunity to listen to this, it probably is an hour long, but you might be able to skip some of it. But it's slowed down, so it's an hour-long presentation just on the DDA stuff that we're talking about, and it does give details. And so if you were confused, I honestly think taking a listen to this might be helpful. Next slide. Somebody had asked us for emails having to do with all the different people that we had in our advocacy hierarchy, and we have them here. They are live links, so I believe everybody got a copy of the PowerPoint, and you can use them. So just wanted to let you know that they're going to those email addresses and contacts are available to you in an easy format. Next slide. Again, more links. It is really useful when you're talking to DDA to use their own language back to them. So these are some of the places that you can get that. The waiver itself, the policy stat, which we talked about earlier. There's a whole self-directed guidance, forms and webinars. So there's a lot of information out there. So while you're developing your PCP, you can use the buzzwords, the keywords that the reviewer might be looking for. And with any luck, you might save yourself some clarifications down the road. So I think next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Patty just to kind of wrap us up a little bit, and we can still do a few questions after she's,
So hi again. I know that you are probably thoroughly confused. Some of you, have been doing this a long time, and this probably made more sense. And, in my travels, I certainly see all of my customers, and I take calls and emails all day and evening from other people. That people are getting a little frightened because there has been a shift. We all feel it. There's been a shift in leadership and a shift in administration of the DDA, and we're beginning to see them being, very much more tight with the money and requiring us to prove that we need things. So just want to give you some reassurance that, you can go through your PCP process, but you're going to have to provide some documentation. So if there are true assessed needs, ask for what you need and be prepared to document the needs that you have. So, I would hate to say spoiled, but we enjoyed a collaborative relationship with DDA for the last many years. And we were able to be fairly confident that they would approve things that we would tell them that we needed. It's a different ballgame right now. So you've got to prepare. We're giving you some resources. SDN cannot fix these problems. We can give you resources, but everyone is going to have to advocate. And we will continue to advocate on a state level, but they're not we're not interested in collaborating, not just with us, but with any advocates across the state. So the DDA has definitely shifted, and we need to shift along with it. So just being prepared to present some documentation as you go through your PCP process. I see someone asked you a question about the personal support enhanced. Is that?
yeah.
What was the specific question?
Oh, can you explain PCP enhanced criteria? That's one of your
I
favorite.
sure wish I could, but first of all, you all need to get a copy of the waiver, right? You need to look at the waiver, and you need
We've
to look
linked
at
it.
the waiver that your particular participant is in. They're all very similar in their descriptions about personal support and the definitions. And they're the same actually in all the waivers. And the same, look at the policy on personal support. Have it copied and sitting on your kitchen table. This is the language you're going to need to use. Now, unfortunately, the DDA has chosen to define personal support enhanced. Remember, enhanced only means an enhanced rate of reimbursement, right? It's an enhanced amount of money. Assuming that is you're getting the enhanced rate of money because the person has the need for a higher skill level staffing, right? So the definition for personal support enhanced is that you will have a nursing care plan or a behavioral plan that demonstrates the need for enhanced support. Well, my goodness, that's a terrible definition, right? Using the name of the service in the definition. So each region may interpret what is the enhanced support criteria. If it's a medical issue, nursing issue, the nurse at the region can take a look at a care plan I've written and make a determination whether he or she thinks that it qualifies. Well, we're going to need to challenge that, right? We're going to need to challenge because there's not a hard and fast criteria. It's not related to HRST level. It's not related to a list of diagnoses. It's not related to the number of hours that you need support. So we're going to have to challenge that. If you truly feel that you need personal support enhanced in order to be able to pay for all the things that go with the higher needs that the individual may have. I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but that is the criteria right now. And we're asking for something more definitive.
In the chat, somebody was saying there's a note in the billing guideline that says DDA may approve temporarily while working on behavior support services. So,
May approve what?
I think they can I guess while you're in an appeal.
Well, that was me, guys. Do you want me
Okay.
to?
Just
chime in?
a real quick one, yeah.
Did you
It
just
is a-
change subjects though? We were talking about
No.
enhanced personal
Oh,
support.
well, it's
Oh, yes.
related. It is related. So in the billing guidelines, real quick, there's a note. So for people that had it before and now they're taking it away, their CCS or them through the clarification, they can draw attention to the note. It's for any one-to-one requested service. It says that DDA may temporarily approve while the team is working to get BSS and or nursing to justify further. So I just want to draw attention to that.
Thank you.
So last thing I'd like to say, you all, is just, I know that it's hard and I know the information is confusing. Focus on getting your documentation together that supports the assessed needs and services that you are asking for. And then if you get a chance to read through all this appeal documentation, you can at least be aware of your due process rights.
And theoretically, you're not alone. You have a team. You have a CCS, hopefully a support broker. So other people who support you. So use everybody in your team to make these decisions and to move your own particular thing forward. So and again, I want to go back to two things: the advocacy all along the line. Don't like a rejection isn't a no until it's in the determination letter. So keep on advocating, and please keep letting us know where the clarifications are coming from, just what the issues are. We will be putting together a survey, I think Carol mentioned earlier, and trying to detail and get actual data from you and support brokers who are on the call. Maybe we'll do a subsection so you can do numbers of people that you're interacting with that are having, multiple clarifications or denials of previously approved services. So we're going to try to run it all down and to be able to document to the Deputy Secretary that there's, real ongoing issues out here. And then lastly, and there may be some other comments from the board members here, so maybe not the last statement. In the beginning, I did mention that we are forming these committees. Some of these committees will be working on long-term issues. Some are going to be advocating on issues currently of the day. So please, if you have an interest in any one of the communities and you can commit some time to volunteering, we would love to hear from you. So please do, let us know of your interest in any of those committees. As always, tell everybody about us, ask us to join. As we've seen through the individual family directed goods and services BRFA attempt, we are very powerful as a group, but that means we need every single one of you and more. As we go forward, advocacy is going to be the name of the game here.
One person did ask me to remind people that ask your CCS if there's clarifications. Don't assume that they're telling you. Keep asking once your plan has been submitted. Have there been any clarifications? Have there been any clarifications? Stay on top of that.
And also remind them that the participant is the one who makes the ultimate decision. They can't be making decisions for you without telling you. And that's advocacy on our part. We have to stay on top of the CCS and make sure that they understand that's not okay.
One person asked me a question, if we could give them a brief summary of our short meeting with the DDA last week. So many of you know that we were meeting with DDA regularly for the last several years, and that stopped with the new administration. And although we were invited to go in person to meet with DDA, the new Deputy Secretary and her team, and we did go for a 30 to 45-minute meeting last week. We asked about, resuming meetings, and the Deputy Secretary has made the decision to institute what is mandated from the waiver, and that is a waiver advisory council. So going forward, she sees that as the structure to have stakeholder feedback, and they will not be meeting individually with the advocacy groups. So stay tuned for that and the opportunity for anybody, a participant, family member, organizations to be involved with that waiver advisory council. So that will be coming at some point. The deputy secretary assured us that she's supportive of self-direction, and people are at the heart of self-direction and their assessed needs. We were letting her know what we have been talking about this last hour and a half and what people are experiencing as they do their person-centered plans. And the headquarters folks seem pretty much disconnected from that. They were really not aware, or at least telling us they're not aware of people having issues with not getting your personal support enhanced, one-to-one, two-to-one overnights, things like that. The other problems of not getting your budget modifications through or getting IFDGS rejections. So it seemed to be this wide disconnect from what humans are experiencing to what the DDA is acknowledging that they're aware of. So we have, like Alicia said, advocacy is going to be the name of the game, and being clear on what you need and what your assessed needs are, and advocating strongly for those. So that was pretty much the summary of that meeting. It was pleasant, but we were not in agreement.
Okay. Well, thanks again. We'll hope to have another meeting. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for coming. It's difficult sometimes to find time to get away and to listen and be a part of this, but just wanted to let you know we really appreciate it. Till next time.
Thank you, everybody.